Hello everyone, my name is Liz Robeson, and welcome to my channel, where I explore the unusual, spiritual, and the supernatural. I think I said that right. But also, I play video games, so I'm really terrible at video games. But just to get into the swing of things, I found a visual novel. It's not really a game, it's just like a book where you can like listen or read what's going on. I will be playing games and everything, but I do like these kind of things because I find them quite soothing. I like the stories behind them. So this is just like a regular like visual book. I'm a huge bookworm. If I remember correctly, I think this takes place in Japan. Yeah, I know my pronunciation is going to be bad, so I apologize ahead of time. And if I get any of this information wrong, please let me know in the comment section below. And we'll just go with how long this is going to take. I'm pretty confident that I think they said it takes about 2 to 3 hours to read through all of it. I might do this in parts, might not. Depends how tired I get from reading. So I guess we could just start reading, right? I did just do a little part before, just to test it out. The first day. It was a dark night and the snow was falling thick and heavy beyond the window of the car. Everything was pure white, like a saucer of milk had been appended over the earth. Oh yeah, the story with this is that there's this writer who's trying to find some inspiration because he's been in a rut for so long. So he decides to go on vacation alone in the middle of nowhere in the mountains. And he's supposed to like fall for the daughter of the owner of this inn he's at. Alright. Anyways. It looked pretty. At least it did when observed from within the confines of the taxi. But I felt a surge of sympathy for whoever might be outside in such a night. The snow can be unforgiving, especially on a mountain like this. Why else would there be so many memories about strange, pale-skinned women that lure unsuspecting men to their icy graves? In a remote place like this, how long would it take before everybody uncovered your corpse? A day? 2 days? A whole week? Perhaps a month? Being a writer, I couldn't help but ponder such morbid things. Though I admit, crime fiction has never been my forte. Should. It's always been my belief that there is enough unpleasantness in real life. We hardly need to fabricate it anymore. Sachiko says that's because I'm sentimental. Apparently, it's one of my better qualities. Sachiko says sentiment manifests itself in my eyes. I have unusually pale eyes. My wife has quite a way with words. I sometimes think her talents are wasted as a wife and mother, when she might have an untapped acumen for storytelling. Yeah, there's some weird words that I haven't heard of, like acumen. She's certainly good at gossiping with the other women who attend art classes with her every Wednesday. Waiting for it. Okay. Sachiko, however, always blushes and shakes her head whenever I suggest this, even as a gentle joke. She says she's more than happy looking after me and our 2 sons. Searching for any greater purpose in life would be presumptuous. I appreciate it, I suppose, but I wouldn't mind if she had a touch more ambition beyond preparing the perfect bowl of miso soup in the mornings. It's funny that the only thing he remembers, like the only better qualities of his wife, is that she makes good soup. Good miso soup. I was like, it's like, is she a kind person? Not that Sachiko's miso soup is anything to be sneezed at, so such a saying. That was one of the things I was going to miss the most, I thought, as the car drove on through the night. Sachiko's miso soup. I won't miss my wife. I'll just miss her food. The food that she makes. The miso soup at the Azami Inn would be perfectly fine, I was sure, but it wouldn't be the same. It wouldn't be Sachiko's. This might sound awfully prosaic. But when food has been prepared by the hands of a woman who loves you and has loved you for 25 years, it acquires special properties you can't find anywhere else. Maybe that's the best definition of marital bliss. Being able to enjoy breakfast together every morning with a small shared smile despite not having all that much to talk about. It's a comfortable, humdrum kind of existence, I suppose. But the further I ascended into the mountains, the more it began to slip away. Okay. With each and every mile I covered, the further away my banal life with Sachiko seemed. Soon, the small details, the taste of her miso soup, the pseudo-religious watering of our much-loved, here's another big ridiculous word, Bougainvillias. I think that's how you say it. Should we look it up? I gotta take off my headphones a little bit so I can hear it. Bougainvillias. I would never be able to pronounce that. Oh, excuse me. Bougainvillias. Alright, let's reread this whole paragraph. Never mind. I'm gonna get back. Okay. Soon, the small details, the taste of her miso soup, the pseudo-religious watering of her much-loved bougainvillias, and the pervading smell of soup began to slip away. I like how you go down to the buttons and they make noise. Okay. I must confess, I was not awfully sorry to be saying farewell to any of it. It wasn't that I did not care for Sachiko, but because I did. I still do. We had fallen into a rut, that was all. We had grown too accustomed to one another, and perhaps I was taking Sachiko and her miso soup for granted. I'm gonna It's hard to appreciate somebody when you see them every single day, and you recite the same pleasantries to them, and they repeat the same pleasantries back. It's too predictable. It would be like playing shogi while being able to read your opponent's moves 5 turns in advance. Where's the fun in that? So, to put it another way, our daily routine had become far too familiar to the extent that it was almost painful. I wasn't trying to run away. I wasn't trying to run away from Sachiko, I told myself. That wasn't it. I just needed a change of pace. I wanted to remind myself how much my wife meant to me. I wanted to remind myself why I loved her. I was journeying away from my wife so I could learn to miss her again, which would hopefully make our eventual reunion all the more sweeter. After giving it some thought, I decided upon the perfect location wherein I could ruminate. Ruminate? Is it ruminate? Alright, we're looking up another word.
Ruminate.
Yeah, it's ruminate. Okay. After giving some thought, I decided upon the perfect location wherein I could ruminate on my marriage. What do even ruminate means? It says think deeply about something. That would be the snow-capped mountains in Hakuba, more than half an hour away from human civilization. There would be no people at the Azami Inn to disturb my solitude. Just the snow and the stars. You know, that sounds really nice. And this guy's saying like, oh, if I was away from my wife, I will be reminded on how much I love her and everything. My thought is this. Why couldn't he just take his wife with him and then they could have like a weekend getaway together? And then pretend like they're newlyweds or something and just do like a couple things and do some things that are different. You know, they could have done that. I think that would have spiced some things up. Reminisce about the good old days and how they did it all. He didn't have to go alone. That's my thought. That's the one thing I don't like about this game. Or the story. Is that he thought the best way to get out of this rut with his marriage was not to talk to his wife or do like go on little dates and stuff. Or to give her flowers. But instead, what he did, he decided that the best way is to leave for a week by himself and be like, oh, maybe if I'm gone, I'll learn to miss her and she'll miss me and then we'll be happy. I was like, okay. And that was fine by me. The young boy driving the taxi cab hummed under his breath. A song did not know and tapped his fingers against the wheel. I wasn't sure if I should do voices for this. I've never done voices or voice acting. Alright, anyways. I think I'm just going to read it. I'm not going to do any voices or anything. Just because this is my first time. Alright, so. We're almost there, he said. And he turned to me and smiled. The darkness obscured much of his face, but I could see the reassuring gap-toothed grin. One of his front teeth was missing. I thought it rude to ask why, so I didn't comment. But I couldn't stop myself from fabricating stories. How far is it now? I asked him, hugging my trunk a little closer to my chest. Sachiko had helped me pack before my departure. I told her she needn't have bothered. Excuse me. See, this part right here in the sentence, it's worse than Old English. I told her she needn't have bothered, but she was insistent. Despite being such a quiet, retiring woman, Sachiko can be awfully insistent about the most mundane of things. She wanted to help him pack. Okay, he's like finding reasons on why he shouldn't be with his wife. Like, why they're in a rut. And, like, he could have changed some things. Like, he could have got her flowers, could have taken her on dates. He could have done different things instead of, like, the same, like, mundane things that they were doing. But instead, instead, he decides to leave for a week and think, oh, this is going to fix all our problems. I think the problem is him. And my thought was like, if you were so bored with your relationship, talk to your wife, and instead of finding reasons on why everything is so mundane and boring, it's like he could have changed it. But it looks like he wasn't in love with her. Like, he loved her. It feels like he loved her just because it was his job, because they've been married for so long, and they have 2 children. But I was like, I don't know. I was like, if things were starting to fade and you're trying to figure out different reasons and find all the negatives about your spouse, I think it's time to leave. Not too far now, said the boy, though a boy might be a touch demeaning, as he must have been in his early 20s. 3 or 4 minutes, maybe 5, accounting for traffic. Okay, that was probably supposed to be a joke. We hadn't passed a single car during the journey from the train station. I must admit, I was a bit relieved. The road was so poorly lit, oncoming cars could have spelt disaster. It's not like you need to get there in a hurry, is it? Asked the boy. What are you going up near Hakuba? What are you doing up near Hakuba, if you don't mind me asking? Oh, I don't mind at all, I said politely. I'm a writer. I thought going somewhere remote would help me focus, generate a few ideas, that kind of thing. Oh, an author. He whistled and it sounded genuinely impressed. Written anything I'd know? I doubt it. I'm not well known by any means, but I make enough to pay the bills. Well, what more can a man ask for? I'm not too world-wise, but it sounds like a success story to me. Not many people who want to be authors make so much as a penny. Ha ha. Yes, I suppose so. I said, running a hand through my hair. Sometimes I forget. I have a lot to be thankful for. And what kind of things do you write? Newspaper articles? Journalism? Okay. He just said he was an author. The taxi driver was saying like, oh, he's an author. Man, he must be famous and everything. And then he asks if he does newspaper articles or journalism. Those are two different things. I'm pretty sure the actual like Japanese, he was continuously like, oh, a writer. Wow, that's great. But when they translated, they said author. I was like, oh. I was like, author and writers are two different things. In my world, that is it. Authors and writers are two different things. Writers are people that like do articles and journalism, poetry. They write, and they get paid to do writing. Authors, on the other hand, are people that do books, like novels and book series. They tell stories, and they get paid to tell stories. That's what an author is. They write books. Writers get paid just for writing. That's how I see it as. That's the difference to me. But to have this thing like completely mess up on the whole like translation thing, it drives me nuts. We're not even at the end yet, and I'm already getting annoyed. This is gonna be longer than the 3 hours. I think we're probably gonna be doing this in parts. Some poetry, and I released a novel a couple years ago too. A novelist. Oh, a novel, is it? He said, and he whistled again. Now that is fancy. I could be ferrying around the next Ogai Moray. Oh, I doubt I would ever reach such levels of fame. I just dabble, really. Well, I hope you include me in your next literary effort, Mr. Tanabe. Tanabe Aiji. All right, Mr. Tanabe, I'll remember that. And he nodded his head determinedly, like a chicken pecking up words. I could just picture that. That was a cruel simile, though, and I chastised myself for thinking such a thing. I hadn't realized it, spending so much of my life inside the city, but I could be quite a snob. I could tell by how you describe your wife. And the only redeeming quality she has is her soup. That was another reason, I told myself, why going to the countryside would be good. It was always useful to see new sights and broaden my horizons. Open my mind. The moon up ahead, shining in the apex of the sky like a pearl, split the swirling fog and snow with pale rays of light. In the dark, the moonlight looked lethal, ethereal. It was the kind of moon so perfectly round and full that could drive one to madness. Okay. I love the moon and everything. I find it pretty and everything, but I wouldn't think it would drive one to madness. This is a very... Okay. When I was reading the description of this game, his one novel was a bust because it was considered too depressing in the description. That's how they described it and why he's not doing too well. And my thought was like, I can see why. You better include me in your next novel, Mr. Tanabe, as the driver with his distinct gap-toothed smile, and I found myself thinking that maybe I would. He wasn't a character that was easy to forget. The tooth helped. I'm Hanada Yosuke. A pleasure to meet you. Oh no, the pleasure is all mine, I demurred, and the young taxi driver, Yusuke, tittered. Alright, incredible. A writer saying it's a pleasure to make my acquaintance. I never thought I'd live to see the day. He sounded so bemused by the idea, I smiled. It's a long paragraph. Okay. You know, if you really want something interesting to write about, for your next novel, of course, there's no better setting than the Azami Inn, said Yuzuke companionably. After a lull in the conversation, it's beautiful around there. Not that I have much of an eye for it. Still, all the snow and the hills and this quaint little building in the middle of nowhere, very pretty. It also sounds like an amazing getaway with your significant other. Just saying. Yes, it sounds delightful. I got a drink. Alright. Lonely too. I think. But that should suit you down to the ground. A bit of peace and quiet helps stimulate the imagination, right? I'm the opposite when it comes to writing. I have to have at least maybe some music playing. I can't write in like complete silence. It drives me insane. Anyways, let's get back to reading. That is the general idea. All the noise in the big city can be a bit... I searched for the correct word, but I couldn't find it. Maybe it had been stolen by the snow. Oh, I can imagine, said Yuzuke, sensing my discomfort. I've lived around here all my life, but still, the city, eh? The big city indeed. That's a long paragraph. I'd love to go there once or twice, just to look around, but I don't think I could ever settle somewhere like that. From what I've heard, there are too many buildings and far too many people. I like the peace and quiet, though. Even I'd get a bit antsy if I had to stay at the Azami Inn too long. I don't know how Miss Kakiyuchi does it. Alright, another word we get to look up.
Proprietress.
Yeah, proprietress. The proprietress. Oh, excuse me. I have hiccups now. The one and the same, said Yuzuke with a nod. She's been living up there, gosh, I don't know how long. Maybe longer than I've been alive, because as long as there has been an Azami Inn, there's been Miss Kakuchi. Miss Kakiyuchi. She used to run it with her husband, so maybe she wasn't too lonely before. But he's dead now. Died years ago. I like how that just comes up in a casual conversation. I looked at Yuzuke, intrigued. Yes, because you're morbid as hell. Ideas began to grow inside my mind, ideas began to grow inside my head, just like acorns sprout into proud oak trees. I know exactly what he's thinking. He's thinking of different ways that his wife killed the husband, or the different ways the husband had died. What happened to Mr. Kakiyuchi? I asked as casually as I could muster, but my efforts were probably in vain. I'd already told Yosuke I was a writer, and people never trust writers. At least, they shouldn't. Alright. We prowled around Misery like vultures and picked the bones clean until there's nothing left. Yosuke didn't seem to be the most intelligent of people, was still sharp enough because he grinned. It was a wolfish grin, all too fitting for the large pearly moon. I clicked it. Thank you. Ah, so you're interested, are you, Mr. Tanabe? He asked. It is an interesting story. I can't help myself. How does he know it's an interesting story other than what he's been playing in his mind? Okay. And rather well known, too. There are all kinds of stories about the Azami Inn, as I said. And Miss Kakiuchi, not all of them are pleasant, and I don't believe half of them, but they're very interesting. I should let you know, before you continue, that I don't write crime stories. I'm so annoyed. But I'm reading. We're gonna continue reading. Ah, well, more's the pity, said Yuzuke with a shrug. When you get a pretty woman and a dead husband, there's bound to be rumors. But the truth is a lot simpler. He was old, Mr. Kakiuchi. A good 2 decades older than his wife. And you know, when you're old and you live in the mountains, chances are you'll catch a cold at some point and you won't be able to fend off. So he died, just like that. Just like that. Rather anticlimactic, all things considered. But people love talking. You can't stop them talking, even in a place like this, Yuzuke smiled. I talk enough myself. My fiancée, Hatsumi, always berates me. Still, she can't hate it that much, or she wouldn't have agreed to marry me. You have a fiancé? Congratulations. As soon as I said congratulations, day 6, congratulations just popped in my head. Yosuke thanked me, smiling sheepishly. Okay. Honestly, I feel a bit sorry for Miss Kakiuchi. All things considered, she must be awfully lonely up there, without a husband, and the residents of Higashikawa. Did I say it right? That's a long word. Aren't too keen on her either. Doesn't she have anybody else? She has a daughter. Sweet little thing. Raiko. Miss Kakiuchi has always been very protective, and no wonder after what happened to her husband. Raiko. I nodded my head. I would have to file this away for future reference. Doesn't she have any staff? Oh, she employs a few girls. My Hatsumi was one of them. But it's a small business. She doesn't get many customers, you see. I see, I said, and I did see. I looked out the window and I could see the hills covered in snow, yet with yet more snow falling, and I saw only too clearly. Another long paragraph. I couldn't imagine many people coming to the Azami Inn, not even those who are passionate about skiing. There were places to stay that were closer to the main roads, where you didn't have to hire a taxi and wend your way through the mountains for over half an hour to reach your destination. Why was that so hard for me to read? If Sachiko were here, I knew what she would say. None of this was very sensible. Still, I wasn't a sensible man, but a sensitive one. This kind of location would, as Yuzuke had said, suit me down to the ground. We have arrived at the inn. I apologize for arriving so late. My train was delayed. It's quite all right. I expected as much, given all the snow, the woman I presumed was Miss Kakiuchi replied. I'm happy to receive any customers, no matter how late they may arrive. Business has been slow? What do you expect, she asked, with such a weary amusement to her tone. Her voice was soft, but there was a certain bite to it, some hardness I was not able to pin down. Perhaps a touch of hardness was only to be expected, coming from a woman who had lived in this inn, high up in the mountains, for so very long. I love the music. Had she been softer, I wondered, when her husband was still alive? I would never know. Now, Miss Kakeuchi. How can I describe her? Words failed me at the time, and they failed me even now. I suppose if I had to put a single word to it, she was beautiful. But that wasn't entirely right. She was the kind of woman who had been beautiful once, beautiful enough to drive men to distraction, but old age had tempered some of her beauty, softening the edges so it no longer had an acute, piercing effect. That was a good thing, I think. Such beauty can be used as a weapon, like an arrow. But this was an arrow whose tip had been sanded smooth. Her hair was dark and glossy, cut into a neat bob, reminiscent of a kokeshi doll. It was an unusual choice for an older woman. She must have been in her 40s, but that only served to heighten my interest in her. He's already checking out another woman. Just saying. Her eyes were the color of roasted tea leaves, and they were lined with thick, long lashes. When she blinked, her lashes fluttered in a begilding manner that cast shadows against her face. Her skin was pale, and though there were some wrinkles around her mouth, it was unblemished, save for two small moles, no longer than pinheads, near her right eye. She wore a modest kimono of muted colors and stood there regally, her hands held at her front. That is a beautiful kimono, though. I like the kimono. If looked at from afar, one could have been forgiven for thinking she was 10 or 20 years younger than she really was. But time waits for no man. At any rate, Miss Kakeuchi didn't seem to be the kind of person who steeped herself in her own nostalgia. Everything about her, from her tone of voice to the way she stood, suggested she was far too sensible to bother with such nonsense. She wasn't sentimental. Something about her posture almost seemed to defy sentiment. She wasn't like me. I suppose we were quite a poor match. In any event, I hope you enjoy your stay at the Azami Inn, said Miss Kakeuchi. It was a line she must have delivered many times, and she said it beautifully, like a skilled artisan might pluck a heart-rending melody from a koto. What's a koto? I must confess, I felt rather abashed. Abashed. Is it abashed or abashed? I'm looking up what a koto is. I know, I went to school for this stuff. I should know. A koto is one of those those instruments that they're long and they're flat, and you like lay them either on the table or on your lap, and you wear like these like plucks on your fingertips, and you just go like this with each thing, and then you use your other hand to hold down the strings to get the different tones. So it's like a laying down guitar kind of thing. I'll include a picture. But I find them beautiful because I remember when I went to school for music and everything, we saw pictures of them and we watched videos on how they were played. So I always wanted to see one being played in person. I had been imagining in my city born and bred Herbris that the folk who resided in the countryside were simpler than I. Somehow, I had been wrong. I am Kakeuchi Kaio, she said by means of making my acquaintance, though there was a certain reticence to her tone. It's nice to meet you. Likewise, I said, bowing my head. My name is Tanabe Eiichi. Mr. Tanabe, Miss Kakeuchi repeated with a small nod of her head. Alright. When she said my name, commonplace though it was, its properties seemed to change in some curious manner. European alchemists might have striven for years to drive base metals into gold, but Miss Kakeuchi had succeeded in a certain kind of what? Alright, we're looking up this word. This word right here. Just tell me how to say it.
Thaumaturgy.
Thaumaturgy? I would never be able to say that. English language. We need to... Okay. Even though we have the ability to make such ridiculously big words, it does not mean we have to. Okay. Let's reread this whole paragraph one last time. But it's thaumaturgy. Okay. When she said my name, commonplace though it was, its properties seemed to change in some curious manner. European alchemists might have striven for years to turn base metals into gold, but Miss Kakeuchi had succeeded in a certain kind of thaumaturgy of her own. That is a hard word to say. Okay. Well, if I need to introduce myself further, I have been running the Azami Inn for some 14 years, ever since the death of my husband. I'm sure Yuzuke has told you about that already. He might have mentioned a thing or two, yes. You don't need to spare my feelings. I know what the people around here say. They enjoy their gossip. There's not much else to gossip about. I don't think Mr. Hanada meant anything by it. He was just making conversation. At my expense of my dignity? I don't doubt, said Miss Kakeuchi icily. Should have got water instead of Dr. Pepper. Though Yuzuke hadn't said anything incriminating, I found myself feeling guilty, as if I had conspired against her. Let us move on from the subject, she said, noticing my discomfort. It is unpleasant, particularly after such a long journey now. Okay. Miss Kakeuchi explained the general running of the inn to me. When meals were prepared, where the hot springs were, and who to speak to if I had a complaint. While I nodded dumbly, I stunned into silence. So, she said once she had finished her short business spiel, I trust this is satisfactory. That is more than satisfactory, thank you, I said, stuttering. Why was I stuttering? Being around Miss Kakeuchi, held under the steady gaze of her dark brown eyes, had the most incredible effect upon me. I felt not like a grown man with two sons, but a naughty child being scolded by my father for playing too zealously about the Zelkova tree in our garden. Zelkova. It's actually kind of a fun word to say. Miss Kakeuchi was probably a few years younger than I, but she regarded me archly, like one who had seen far more than I could ever imagine. I know it might sound rather harsh, but I understood immediately why the residents of the nearby village didn't like her very much. She was not a likable woman. Shall I get Reiko to show you to your room? She may as well make herself useful, said Miss Kakiyuchi. With that declaration, the proprietress turned, her bobbed hair fluttering, and called out in tones that would have made an emperor balk. Reiko, we have a customer. There was a shuffling of feet as Reiko hastened to answer her mother's call. I pictured her as skinny, uncomfortably so, with big eyes and lips pulled into a permanent frown, her head bent and her gait stumbling. But when Raikou, who answered Miss Kakiyuchi's summons, was rather different. My imagination had betrayed me yet again. She was rather young, that much was true. Still a teenager, I suppose, and she was slight but not in an awkward manner. Her limbs were pale and slender, and she moved like a little ballerina. Yes, you called, Mother? She looked like Miss Kakiyuchi did, or had done, I imagine, before old age had seen fit to sap away her youthful charms. Rayuko even had a beauty mark beneath her eye, though it was located under her left, not her right. Other than that, it was an almost perfect facsimile of her mother's, like she was some kind of copy. What is with these words? Alright. Homunculus child raised in a glass jar. But these thoughts were rather too fanciful. This is Mr. Tanabe, said Miss Kakiyuchi, gesturing towards me. He has recently arrived from Tokyo. Can you take his bags and show him to his room? It's the one where you were preparing earlier, on the west side. Of course, said Reiko, with a small bow of her head. I shall do it at once. She bent to pick up my bag, first brushing the sleeve of her kimono to the side, when... No, that will never do. Ryuko flinched at the reprimand. She was now halfway between retrieving my case and standing straight. The sleeves of her kimono were still rolled back, and I could see her arms. They were as pale as the snow that fell outside, shot through with delicate blue veins. Though I wanted to, I could not bring myself to look away. When you are picking up luggage, Raikou, you shouldn't let your sleeves bunch up about your elbows. It's unseemly, said Miss Kakiyuchi. I'm sorry. Don't apologize, said Miss Kakiyuchi coolly, for I have told you this time and time again. Try to remember next time, please. All right. Raikou sounded so despondent. Any words of reassurance I might have thought to offer died on my tongue. I had already divined during this most perfectionary of greetings that her mother scolded her quite a lot. Raikou led me to my room in silence, my suitcase held in her arms. If the case was heavy for her, I did not know. She didn't slow down, and neither did she seem hampered by her burden. Her footsteps were slow and regular, like that of clockwork. Hemmed in by her kimono, she could only take short, dainty steps, right foot in front of the left, then the left in front of the right, then repeat. Tap, tap, tap. I followed along behind her like an attentive schoolboy. The wooden hallway was dimly lit, and I could hear the sounds of the wind whistling outside. My footsteps made the floor creak ominously. I tried to think of things to say, but nothing sounded quite right. The weather's awful around here, isn't it? Would have been too pedestrian. You really do have beautiful eyes, would have been far too forthcoming. Is your mother always like that? Would have been too personal. Despite having many things I wanted to say, I could say nothing. I didn't know why, but I wanted to talk to this girl. Maybe it was a pity because of the way she had flinched when her mother had spoken to her. And really, she must have been lonely. If Yuzuke suspected Miss Kageyoshi of melancholia, and then what about her daughter? Ryuko's hair fluttered behind her, icy black like a veil in the darkness. But though she was small, Ryuko did not tarry, or is it tarry, in her march. Instead, she continued as quiet as a mirror and just as inscrutable. Tap, tap, tap. Even back then, I was enamored with her. Maybe it was the romance of the situation. How could you blame me? There was something very poetic about Ryuko's plight. An uncommon beauty hidden from prying eyes, lost amidst the ice and snow. Tap, tap, tap. After 20 seconds or so, though it seemed like longer, Ryuko's footsteps stopped. She halted by a nondescript wooden door, much like the others that lined the hallway. Your room, she said by means of explanation, not that it needed explaining. I thanked her all the same and took my case from her outstretched hands. Our fingertips brushed for less than a second. If I had been a younger boy, Kenji's age, perhaps, I fear I might have blushed. It's rather late, and we don't normally serve food at this time, said Ryuko, addressing the floor rather than my face. But I'm sure the cook would be more than happy to prepare something for you. Mother said you traveled a long way. It's all right, I replied, though it had been 5 hours since I'd last eaten. I don't want to inconvenience you. But you're a guest, said Ryuko. This time she did lift her head. Doesn't that give you the right to inconvenience us just a little? You're paying for the privilege. Ah. I blinked. Words once more were conspicuously absent. She was actually smiling. So she did not dislike me, and neither was she afraid. She couldn't have been, to joke with me so casually, for that was what it was. A joke. I couldn't stop myself from laughing. It was a small laugh, really, but then again, Ryuko's smile had been rather demure. A hearty chuckle wouldn't have suited the atmosphere, and I've never been one to laugh that much. I'm too self-conscious. But Ryuko made me laugh all the same. Well, you might have a point, I said. I suppose I wouldn't mind some green tea. I need a bit of warming up. I know, said Ryuko with a nod of her head. It can be horribly cold around here. I hope my room has a kotatsu. A kotatsu. Of course, we live in the mountains. It would be a sin not to have a kotatsu. Our guests might catch their deaths of cold, she said, throwing her arms in the air for emphasis. I smiled. Well, I wouldn't want that. I don't intend to stay here that long. Though the mountains were picturesque, I did not fancy extending my trip. A most unfortunate side effect of death is that it tends to render people immobile, tied to one place for the rest of their, well, not lives. I don't blame you, said Ryuko seriously. I wouldn't stay here if I had the choice. Which I don't. A small sigh. Oh well, I shouldn't say things like that. Mother would be cross with me. She'd say it was bad for business. I think things are stocked against us already. But what do I know? You seem to be quite knowledgeable, in my humble opinion. Ehehe. Thank you, she said with a bow of her head. Her hair fluttered, caught in a sudden draught of icy air. I knew it was because of the wind, but, seized by sentimentality, I couldn't help but imagine it was because she was so full, very full of life. Ryuko was livelier by far than she had been before. The sudden contrast between her demure, trampled lily persona and the new one I was witnessing, witty, funny, and unabashedly charming, caught me off guard. Could the caterpillar have emerged from its chrysalis in a scant 5 seconds? But no, such transformations do not take place so rapidly. Not in the real world. I wondered. Did Ryuko's newfound freeness have anything to do, perhaps, with the absence of her mother? Alright, I'll see about the green tea and perhaps a simple bowl of rice porridge. I think you should get something in your stomach. Do I look peaky? Ryuko pretended to ponder, one hand beneath her chin, perhaps a bit tired. Long train journeys do that, especially at my age. I wonder. I'd never been on a train before, said Ryuko. There was something wistful about her tone. Her eyes were misty and far away. She was so transparent, though. Her thoughts flickered across the surface of her mind, like ripples in a pool. But then Ryuko shook her head and clapped her hands and the illusion was over. Right. Green tea, rice porridge. Please feel free to make yourself at home and discover the delights of the Azami Inn. Thank you for your hospitality, I said, bowing my head. I intend to. Oh, and it's perfectly fine if you want to use the kotatsu. But make sure the fire in the brazier has burnt down before you sleep. We wouldn't want you to start a fire. No, I said with a shake of my head. We wouldn't want that. Not at all, Ryuko repeated. But I couldn't help but wonder. Inside her ember eyes, I swore I could see flickering flames. Ryuko was as good as her word. She returned to my room momentarily with green tea and rice porridge on a tray. They were both piping hot. She did not linger, though I would have liked to converse with her further. That would have been improper. A woman should not tarry for so long in a man's private quarters, though Ryuko was not a woman, really so much as a girl. Ryuko's kimono flattened out her figure, making it nigh impossible to tell whether she had curves or not, but her age was apparent by the tone of her voice and the softness of her skin. That's a beautiful kimono. Not that such details improved the situation. If anything, it made them worse. A woman in a man's room at night is improper enough, but a teenage girl, that is truly a source of scandal. I love that hairpiece. Scandal in the eyes of the newspapers, but a sensational romance if transmuted by the hand of an author. It all depends on how you frame things. I don't know. In any case, Ryuko departed with that now familiar tap, tap, tap of her wooden sandals against the tatami mats, and I was left alone. The green tea was delicious, the leaves brewed perfectly, and the rice porridge was thick and nourishing. I enjoyed the food a great deal, though not as much as Sachiko's. Sachiko knows exactly how I prefer my tea, and she can steep the leaves in a perfect accordance to my preferences, down to the last millisecond. Of course, Sachiko's tea would be superior. I'd been married to her for more than 20 years. It is a most curious phenomenon, however, that men accustomed to perfection will begin to tire of it. Is there anything more selfish than a man who cannot be satisfied? Sometimes I have to wonder. It was still snowing outside. I could see the snow in the air, falling thick and fast beyond my window. The sight of it made me feel warmer than perhaps I was, for the room was cold and seemed to bleed heat from the tatami mats. Fortunately, the kotatsu helped. Warmed both inside and out and tired from my journey, I turned in for the night. Half an hour later, I think I might have dreamt about Ryuko. The second day. Alright, I think I'm gonna stop here with this one. This recording. Let me do it over this. Yes! Okay. Alright. We did the first day. We're gonna go to the title screen. It's gonna be so loud. Actually, I want to return to the main menu. Yes! Alright. Anyways. I think we're gonna end it here for now. I gotta stretch. I gotta get something to drink. That took way longer than it needed to for the first day. So many words. So many big words. But I hope you guys have a good day. Please correct any mispronunciations I've said. I would like to learn from you guys. I did the best I could. So until next time, I'll see you guys soon. Bye.